Hello and welcome to Alternate Galaxies, a spin-off podcast from The Doctor Who Show. I'm Dave.
And I'm Rob.
And tonight we are doing the second of our 3 Alternate Galaxies on Star Trek movies, and tonight it is Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Ready for this one, Rob?
Absolutely, Dave. I'm here.
Fantastic. So this was released in the US on the 6th of December 1991. Nicholas Meyer is back as the director. The screenplay is by Nicholas Meyer and Den Martin Flynn. The story, now we'll talk about this, a bit of contention, but broadly by Leonard Nimoy and Nicholas Meyer. Now, Rob, this one was made for $30 million. Which in 2025 dollars would be $71 million. Still not a lot for a sci-fi, but certainly a lot more than they made The Wrath of Khan for.
Yeah, but it's a decade on from then, I guess.
It is, but even adjusting for inflation, it's still quite a bit more.
Fair.
And at the time, it made $96.8 million, which in today's money is $230 million worldwide. Not a bad take.
Yeah.
This is coming off the back, though, of what many people would consider to be the best and the worst of the Star Trek movies. Star Trek 4, which in today's money made $392 million, which I think is certainly the best of the original series movies. It may have been eclipsed by some of the modern ones. And Star Trek 5, which only made $164 million, barely made its money back after advertising.
Ouch.
Yes. So we are back for the final of the original series Star Treks. We've spoken about The Wrath of Khan. Why did I pick this one, Rob? Well, for exactly the reasons I just said. If we're going to do one in the back half of the OG movies, I thought everybody says that Star Trek 4 is the best of the lot, and yeah, it's pretty good, and what are we going to do? Come in and go, yes, it's still funny, yes, it's got whales, yes, it's still great, and I know there's been some revisionism about Star Trek 5, and people are finding things to love, and people are understanding everything that Shatner was up against, although he was the director. How much was in and out of his control is contentious. But again, coming on and going, hey, this is the one that didn't really work, I didn't think was all that interesting. But Star Trek 6, I have a lot to say, and it's the one I just don't think gets the attention. It's not the one that everyone loves. It's not the one that everyone dislikes. It's just the one that wraps it all up. But I think it's really good, so we're talking about it.
Fair enough.
So, Rob, we will have spoilers now from now.
Okay.
Because we're talking about the movie. Not as spoilable a movie as Star Trek 2 was. We don't have to talk about Spock's death or anything. But yeah, we will have spoilers from now on. Rob, I've given the big intro. I've talked about where we are. Star Trek 6, first memories. When did you see this?
I was right out of the loop with Star Trek films around this time, which is probably no surprise after what I've said about watching Trek films in our previous Wrath of Khan review. That said, I would have absolutely have been watching Next Gen around this time, so I had an interest in Trek on some level. I even remember Dave collecting a set of Next Gen trading cards around this time. Yeah. So I would have been fully conscious of Star Trek and of this film being available for me to go and watch, but again, I never bothered with it at the cinema. At a pinch, I'd say I saw it whenever it came onto television in the year or years afterwards. So given I was 16 when it came out, I was probably 17 or 18, but by the time I saw it on television. So I was seeing it with those young adult eyes. And I do recall thinking it was a bit on the nose with the whole allegory to like Chernobyl and the Soviet Union in general and all that sort of stuff. In a way, I kind of saw it as everything I thought was wrong with Star Trek, that when it wanted to make a point, it was always about as subtle as a sledgehammer, or almost as if it was being made for idiots. That's how I felt back then. I'll stop there.
Oh, gee, I was going to say, if you don't like unsubtle Star Trek, I'll get you to watch A Private Little War sometime from the original series, because that's terrible. No, that's interesting. Look, I also missed it in the cinema. It came out just as I was first starting to get really into Star Trek, and by the time this came out of video, I was really getting into Star Trek. So I did buy it on VHS. It was the first Star Trek movie I actually bought my own copy of. $25 at Myer it was. At the same time, I bought the book, which had an absolutely gorgeous cover, and I devoured that. And this was, of course, part of the whole 25th anniversary of Star Trek in 1991. So I was sort of getting into that as well. And as part of the 25th anniversary, The Next Generation did the double episode Unification in season 5. And somebody had a bootleg copy of that they brought to the local Doctor Who Club meeting. Now, it was one of those multi-gen NTSC conversion tapes, so it wasn't a great copy, but they put that on, and they're only up to about season 2 of Next Gen broadcasting free-to-air in Australia. And I can remember, even at the age of 12, watching Unification and some other season 5 episodes at the club meeting and going, this is a lot better than what's on TV. This show gets really, really good. And that sort of encouraged me to go and find some other episodes and get a bit ahead of the broadcast in some ways. But no, this was a very big part of me getting into Trek, buying tapes, buying books. And so it has a very special place in my memory. And I do remember watching it and thinking, this looks really good. Now, they used a different film type to record this movie to make it look a bit better, and it does look great. I was really enthralled by it. At the time, I didn't think it was the best Star Trek movie. I certainly thought that Star Trek 4: The Voyage Home was the greatest, but I was a child at the time, so, I was enraptured with the simplicity of Star Trek 4. I'll stop there.
How much of that, like it being this very important film to you as you came into your Star Trek fandom, how much of that plays into you really bloody loving this right now? I mean, you might legitimately love aspects of it, but, when we talk about some Doctor Who stories, it's like, oh, I saw this when I was X age or, whatever, so it's very special to me. Is that the same here?
Yeah, I think that is a big part of it, both because of when I discovered it, both because of how I felt about it at the time, but also this was the first Star Trek movie that I felt like I was discovering as it came out. Even though I missed it in the cinema, I still was seeing it as it came out, as opposed to stuff like the motion picture Star Trek 2, where it looked a bit old. It was something from the past I was coming back to find. When I borrowed the novelisation of the motion picture from the local library, it was a sort of 15-year-old book that felt like a 15-year-old book and had been well read and all the rest of it. So this felt like it was something new, not something old I was finding. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. That's a big part of it.
Got it.
So big picture, Rob, having gone back and watched it for the podcast, what do you think of this one?
I had a good time with it. Now that the USSR is a distant memory, it's almost quaint and interesting to see how they use that angle. There would be people watching it today who don't see that angle at all. They just don't remember that era. They'd have to sort of really sort of bone up on history to sort of understand it better. And of course, I'm also self-aware enough to know that I'm no longer a snotty kid who was literally studying US-Soviet relations back in 1992 for 3-unit modern history for the HSC, and in turn being very dismissive of a science fiction film trying to make an allegory of what I'd just been studying for the HSC. So yeah, I sat back and enjoyed it as a film this time around. I still had the odd thought like, okay, this is meant to be space Siberia, but guys, why not make it a swamp planet or a desert or something, Just as awful and challenging to be in, but not this one-to-one representation as if we won't get the allegory if it's meant to be like Siberia and it's not snowing, Again, we're not morons out here. I did have those thoughts still.
Yeah, I watched it again and I still love it. It's still my favourite Star Trek movie. There's so much in this that I do enjoy. But yes, as I watched it with a slightly more critical eye for the podcast, there were moments and ideas that I did go, yeah, that's a bit over the top, or yes, that's not even allegory, that's just, I don't know what it is, but it's sledgehammer. Yeah. There were moments like that. But look, I do enjoy this and I'm looking forward to chatting about it. Let's keep talking then about that setup allegory, that whole concept of it. When they were looking to do Star Trek 6 and Nicholas Meyer was coming back on board because he was the guy that did Star Trek 2 and it was a big hit, and Leonard Nimoy had sort of proved his worth by helming Star Trek 4, which was also a big hit, and then Shatner had done 5 and we weren't letting Shatner near it again. So Meyer and Nimoy are chatting, and they originally had this idea, or the studio had this idea of, well, let's get rid of the old cast because they're old and feeble now. Let's do a reboot. Let's do a prequel. And the fans hated it, and Gene Roddenberry hated it, and the cast arced up. So they said, well, we won't do that then. One of them says, and they dispute who it was that said it first, but one of them says, let's talk about the wall coming down in space. And from that, the whole thing flows. Praxis is Chernobyl. Gorkon is Gorbachev, or Gorbachev/Lincoln, as Gorkon is meant to be. It goes all the way through that. And I think that idea of saying, well, if the Klingons are an allegory of the Soviet Union, and we did the whole Cold War thing with them back in the 60s, things are changing. How would that look now? And I think that does set up a really good premise. Now, occasionally I do think the premise wags the dog. The tail of the premise wags the dog. But I still think it's a really interesting idea to set up.
Yeah, it gives the film some historical weight. It's not just imaginary space politics that has been just made up. It's interesting on at least one level, despite what I've just said. It's a reflection on what was happening on Earth at the time. Makes sense.
Yeah, and in some ways it does feel very dated because, here we are staring down the barrel of, I don't know whether it's a hot or cold conflict with Russia. Certainly if you're in Ukraine, it's a very hot conflict with Russia at the moment.
Yeah.
The hope of this movie, I think, is misfounded, and that's sad. But the ideas are really good. But yes, just bringing it into the real world, I love Spock's line about only Nixon could go to China. and that's something that has been used and sort of adopted now in a lot of discussions about global politics. But even there was a line I didn't realise at the time was, again, straight out of Cold War discussions, where they're having the trial and the general says to Kirk, "Don't wait for the translation, answer me now." That is a direct line from what was said during the UN debates about the Cuban Missile Crisis. Adlai Stevenson said to the Russian ambassador, "Don't wait for the translation, answer me now." So,
right.
I didn't realise that until I saw the movie 13 Days. I've gone, I've seen that line before.
It's a Star Trek line.
It's a Star Trek line. So yeah, look, they do pull a lot of things from the real world in there. And I think that's it. Look, it's a good premise at the very least.
Yeah. What's most clever, I think, now that I look back on it after many decades and as a 50-year-old man who's been around the block once or twice, is it doesn't make peace look clean or easy. There's fear and racism, there's assassinations, Kirk is openly bitter, even the Klingons are divided. I think it's that messiness that makes the allegory work in spite of the subtle as a sledgehammer stuff, that this isn't a fairy tale about everyone suddenly just starts holding hands. It's about how ugly and then suspicious, real-world détente can be. And I think that makes it feel more grown-up than a lot of modern Trek, which tends to smooth out those rough edges. I think to be more PC, probably. But I think this benefits from not smoothing out those edges. It shows this as being a messy, not very easy thing to do. And that's realistic.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think this movie would work without that aspect to it, without that testing of the characters. That was very controversial at the time because Gene Roddenberry, as we all know, had this vision that in the future everybody loves each other and no one has prejudice and all the rest of it. Now,
you don't need money,
Yeah, all of that sort of thing. Now, by this stage, Roddenberry's very much on the outer with the studio. He's being slowly eased out of the way within the Next Generation. But at this stage, he was very, very sick, to the point that he was an associate producer for the movie, which basically meant that as long as they showed him a version of the movie for him to comment on before it went out, they had met their contractual obligations to him. So Nicholas Meyer did sit down with Roddenberry and said, right, here's the movie, give me your comments. And Roddenberry said, I don't like this, and this is wrong, you need to change this. And Meyer said, well, hang on, you've completely missed the point. Had quite an intense argument with him, not realising quite how sick Roddenberry was, because Roddenberry died 2 days after that.
Ouch.
So Meyer has said that had he known how sick Roddenberry was, he would not have gone nearly as toe-to-toe with Roddenberry over it. But yes, this movie is one of the first pieces of Star Trek to come out after Roddenberry passes away, and hence it's dedicated to him. But yes, this is very much outside of that Roddenberry vision, but they are really clever, I think, about the way they do it. For example, getting Brock Peters, the star of To Kill a Mockingbird, to be the one that talks about the Klingons being the scum of the galaxy, really, really hits home. Now, Brock Peters had a lot of trouble delivering those lines. He felt nauseous saying them. Originally, the line about guess who's coming to dinner that Chekov has, again, a reference to a very important film that looked at the civil rights in the 60s. That was going to be given by Uhura. And
Right.
Nichelle Nichols. And again, you think about how powerful it would be to have the woman who's known as the black woman on Star Trek, who was a big inspiration for a lot of black women in the US in the 60s, having her give the line, "Guess who's coming to dinner," would have been very powerful, but she wouldn't do it, so they gave it to Chekov. But you can see what they're doing. They're really allowing that allegory to come through.
And it's falling under that subtle as a sledgehammer umbrella, I think.
Yeah. But again, had it been a bunch of middle-aged white dudes doing this, I don't think it would have worked as well as getting heroes and people that we recognise as being leaders of the civil rights or images of the civil rights movement to do it. Now,
that's fair.
Now, let's move on to Kirk particularly and segue into that, because Kirk is one who really struggles with this. And famously, when they're having that discussion between Kirk and Spock in the briefing room, and Kirk says, "Let them die," Shatner said, I can't say that. And they said, "No, you've got to say that." He said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll do a deal. I'll say the line, but then keep the camera on me, and I'll sort of, shake my head and shake my hands and go, no, I didn't mean it. And Maya's gone, "Fine, okay, whatever." And then cut that bit, so it just had the impact of the line.
Yeah, good. But
the fact that Shatner has those moments of reflection where he says, "How does the future get past people like me?" That's the whole point of the movie. It's about older generations and people who have got some prejudice because of their lived experiences in some cases, going, "Okay, people, I need to get past this if we're going to have peace." And if it was, as you said, Rob, if it was just, "Okay, we're going to have peace now," awesome, that wouldn't be a movie.
Yeah. Kirk, I think, in this film is like an endangered species if it was today's filmmaking, because he's angry at the Klingons, and the film doesn't sugarcoat it. You're right. His prejudice is raw, it's personal, it's born of loss. It's not just some abstract principle. Modern Star Trek, again, would certainly sand this down and make it more therapy circle, touchy-feely. But here you've got the captain not wanting a bar of them, and he isn't pretending otherwise. And that tension, as much as it might make a modern viewer see this and recoil a bit and think, "Oh, what a bastard," or "What a dinosaur," is, you're quite right, what makes his eventual growth mean something.
Yes.
Because we've got to see where he comes from in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah, and we see Kirk struggling with that, but I think it's really important that the movie does contrast Kirk's bigotry, his racism. That's because of lived experience. He's fought these guys for 30 years. They've literally killed his son. They contrast that with the two crewmen that you see who have that little side conversation about, "Oh, did you see they all look the same?" And, "Oh, they smell," and like genuine, proper bigoted racism. I think the movie's very clear to show, no, Kirk's not that.
No, different, yeah.
Any thoughts on Spock? Because he gets a very different role in this movie, Rob.
Yeah, I don't know how you feel about this, but this is how I feel. I think Spock feels oddly underused in this for such a central figure. I mean, he's present, and if you wrote down what he does on paper, he does a lot. He's mentoring Valeris, he's driving the peace mission, but it never quite lands for me as a very defining or very strong sort of Spock story. He doesn't get that moment of, I don't know, profound insight or emotional weight that we're used to. He's more just like the scaffolding, holding the plot up rather than the soul of the thing, which is strange, given he is a central figure here. I can see that quite plainly. But he's usually more pivotal than this somehow. I don't know. I see Spock very strangely in this film.
I don't disagree with what you've said. Spock has really evolved almost out of the movie at this point. And I think it's a good idea that Spock isn't just spending his entire life being James Kirk's underling. And he has gone off and he's been mentored by his father, Sarek, to be an ambassador and helped with these dialogues. And he's sort of gone beyond just being a Starfleet second in command. And that's really good. And it does, though, mean that he's not being quite as proactive and not quite as spacey, I guess, as we're used to him being. And there's almost a bit of a sense with him now feeling as though he's outgrown this all. And so even when he's in command of the Enterprise in the second half, it's like a sort of a granddad letting the kids have their go. Yeah, I don't quite know how else to put it, but yes, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, he's not the Spock of earlier films. I'll say that.
No. McCoy, who we sort of were a bit down on in Star Trek 2, does get one more good trip off the Enterprise with Kirk. And I like to see McCoy in this situation. I like McCoy's world-weary pessimism balanced with Kirk's optimism. Even at the end of his career, even as an older man, even as a man confronting the future, Kirk is still an energetic, optimistic guy who still wouldn't mind, pulling a six-shooter and having a fight and getting the girl. And McCoy's just like, why can't I just retire? And I think it makes a good contrast. It's nice to see DeForest Kelley getting just to do that one more time.
Yeah, I think he gets one of his better late-era outings in the films, and he is more than just comic relief. Although that said, he does give a line during their trial when they're in space Siberia, and all the Klingons laugh, and DeForest Kelley sort of smiles like, oh yeah, you like that? It's just the look on his face is just delighted that they liked his joke. But as Kirk's sidekick through the conspiracy and the prison break from Siberia, he's proactive, he's scrappy, he's very Bones about the whole thing. And it's fun seeing him thrown into the thick of it rather than just, grumbling on the sidelines. So yeah, McCoy is pretty cool in this.
Yeah, it's arguably McCoy's best movie of the bunch. Maybe some of his dialogue in the motion picture gets there, but he really is just sort of comic relief in 4. I don't even remember what he did in 5. So yeah, it is a very good movie from McCoy.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's move away from the Starfleet characters for just a moment and talk about the Klingons.
Yeah.
I'll let you go first, Rob, because I've got some thoughts on this. We've got the Klingons. We've got bloody Christopher Plummer from The Sound of Music. We've got David Warner. Really, really high class actors. And in fact, Shatner and Plummer first worked together back when they were both doing Shakespeare in Canada, and Shatner was understudying for Plummer.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I've got a lot to say on a few different things, but I'll begin by saying the Klingons are a real mix. You do have Christopher Plummer, you do have David Warner, you got Michael Dorn in there as well. So you've got white guys, black guys, Brits, Canadians, Americans, all under the same ridges. It feels like they just hired the best voices and faces and just threw them into wigs. Yeah. Modern Trek, especially I'm thinking Discovery, not that I watched all of Discovery, but the first 2 seasons I watched of Discovery seemed to go the other way. They redesigned the Klingons to be much darker skinned, very heavy prosthetics, a more unified sort of look, and obviously that was a deliberate production sort of decision. They wanted them to look like a single sort of very imposing species rather than just a bunch of, Shakespearean actors in brown makeup. It's cleaner the way they do it in the new series, but I think you lose some of that old mishmash charm that we have here. I'll stop there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that either. I think that I have a big pro and a big con with the Klingons. The pro is that they have got such a good cast, giving, for the most part, really good, sumptuous dialogue that you just go, I don't care about anything else. The Klingons in this work really, really well, and I love David Warner's Gorkon. I love General Chang, played by Christopher Plummer. I love all the others. I think it works really, really well, and they're good in this movie, and for the story they want to tell, it works really, really well. However, in the wider canon of Star Trek, it is pretty much impossible to reconcile the Klingons as depicted in this movie with anything else we've seen before or since. It's just so hard to imagine Gorkon even becoming the Chancellor of the Klingon Empire. How does this sort of genteel, cerebral peacemaker end up the leader of a warrior race where you've got to fight to the death to get promoted? And I compare him to Garon in TNG and DS9, and it's not comparable. Even Chang, a great character, but I compare him to someone like General Martok and go, they're completely different. So it is sort of doing its own very specific thing here. It works here, but it only works here.
Yeah. We've mentioned David Warner, and he's killed off pretty early in the film, but he's up there on the screen, holding court with the classic Star Trek team. And for people who might only know him through Doctor Who stuff, whether it's the Matt Smith episode Cold War, funnily enough, a Cold War episode, yes. Or he's one of the Unbound Doctors. He is a much bigger deal. I mean, I've mentioned listening to Patrick Stewart's autobiography just recently, he speaks so glowingly of him several times in that autobiography because David Warner was smashing it in theatre in the 1960s. Like, seriously, he was one of the best, if not the best, Britain had to offer.
Yes.
But then in the early 70s, he got stage fright and didn't do theatre for about 30 years afterwards. He shifted his career onto sort of TV and film and such. But yeah, it's just great to see him here because in more recent times, I probably do know him best from Doctor Who stuff. And then just to see him in a big Star Trek film, it's quite a thrill, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. He was about to make it big in Titanic.
Right.
And he is in Babylon 5, we should mention that.
Yes, indeed.
And he does turn up in my all-time favourite episode of The Next Generation.
There you go. And that's where Patrick Stewart would have worked with him again. Yeah,
because I think that is one of Stewart's favourite episodes as well. He's a very, very big fan of Chain of Command.
Yeah.
Anything more on the Klingons, Rob?
Yeah, just fine. I mentioned Michael Dorn. He pops up in this as well. And interestingly, I noticed, Dave, on screen, he gets called Worf, like Colonel Worf or whatever.
Yes.
But in the credits, he's just listed as something like Klingon Defense Attorney, which I find very weird. I don't think that's very common. If you have a character named on screen, but then in the credits you don't actually use that name, I found that very weird. And of course, yes, he's meant to be an ancestor of Worf on TNG and all of that stuff. So just a nice little crossover. Yeah,
that is very, very weird because it was a very deliberate attempt. After several years of this idea that TNG and the original series should never interact, they should not overlap, they were now starting to go, well, actually, no, they can overlap, and Leonard Nimoy turns up in Unification in that season of TNG. But in return, Michael Dorn turns up as Worf's grandfather, Colonel Worf, in this. But to the point where they actually set the conference on Khitomer, and it's part of canon established in the first season of TNG, that Worf's father was killed at Khitomer when it was attacked by the Romulans. So obviously Colonel Worf loved Khitomer so much that he settled down and raised his family there.
Nice. Very nice.
I want to move on to Sulu and the USS Excelsior because this is a part of the movie I absolutely love. Sulu is one of my favourite characters from original Star Trek. I really like the character. I really like George Takei. I know that he and Shatner are refusing to die before each other, which is just hilarious.
Well, if it keeps them both around, that's a great thing.
No, absolutely. Just hate for each other is keeping them both alive, and that's okay. So I really enjoy seeing Sulu as the captain of the Excelsior. I like this idea that some of the members of the crew didn't just stay as Kirk's underlings for their career and have gone, no, I'm going to go off and get promoted and get my own starship. Yeah. And so I love what he's doing there. I love the crew. I love the USS Excelsior. I'm sorry, as good as all the Enterprises are, the Excelsior-class starship is my favourite model design from Star Trek. I really, really love that model. And
it's a lot chunkier.
It's a lot chunkier. It's a lot just meatier. And it does turn up with a few changes as the Enterprise B in a couple of movies' time. Any thoughts about the Excelsior, Rob?
Yeah, it's almost like Sulu's in a different movie because he's always appearing on screens and such, talking to everybody else. I like the Christian Slater cameo.
Yes.
Where he comes and talks to him while he's in bed. That's kind of cool because Christian Slater was a young actor I liked back in that era. He was in a lot of cool films like Heathers and, gosh, what else was he in? Young Guns 2 and things like that. Yeah,
and he got the role because his mum was the casting director.
Is that right?
And even though he was quite a big name already by that stage, he took scale for a walk-on. He took like $500 or something.
Why not? If you get to put on that uniform and be in the Star Trek universe, of course you'd do that.
Absolutely, yes.
It's like if someone said to me, do you want to be in the background of a Doctor Who episode? Yes.
Yeah,
sure.
That's right. Well, I wouldn't even take the $500. I'll just do it, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. So look, Rob, there's a number of other cast members. I just want to go through them. Some we've mentioned already, but just talk about the quality of this cast. Christopher Plummer, lots of movies, including The Sound of Music. David Warner, big star of the stage. Brock Peters from To Kill a Mockingbird, and he'll be back as Sisko's father in Deep Space Nine. Kurtwood Smith, who's done a lot of things, but I know him as the dad from That 70s Show. Kim Cattrall, who's had a huge career. Christian Slater, just mentioned. Michael Dorn from TNG. Renee Abiyawan as who of course plays Odo in Deep Space Nine, but he's there as Colonel West. This is an absolutely stellar cast. And it says to me that after a lot of teething problems getting the Trek movies going, and some being better than others, we are now at a point after 25 years of Star Trek where you can command some of the best names in the industry, and they will come on for a movie that, as I said, it was only, what did I say was the $30 million it cost at the time to assemble that cast for $30 million and have some sci-fi effects, which took a lot of the budget. These guys are not demanding their normal fee, surely.
No. And throw in Iman as well, who'll go on to marry David Bowie probably not long after this.
Of course, yes.
You know, so you've got this moment in Trek where Ziggy Stardust's future wife is helping Kirk and McCoy escape from a Klingon gulag. I mean, that's a wild bit of trivia. And she's just great. It's only a small role, that shapeshifter role, but the best I can describe it is that the energy she brings to it makes her more than just a plot device. You know, of course she's very beautiful and otherworldly to look at, which really helps. But I think she really sells that part as well. I think she's great in this. Yeah,
all those minor parts are really, really good. Again, the role of Colonel West is not a big role. He's probably got about 5 lines across the entire thing. And yes, Colonel West is obviously a pun on Colonel Oliver North.
Yes.
Not the most subtle of pun there, but when you get
again, subtle as a sledgehammer.
Exactly. But again, when you get an actor of Rene Auberjonois' ability, just giving those 5 lines, he's suddenly a very real character. Kurtwood Smith as the president. Again, 5 lines across the whole thing, but he gives a sense of gravity to it that's really good. Any of those other characters, Rob, that we haven't spoken about, you want to pull out and say anything about?
Oh, no. Look, I love seeing someone like Christopher Plummer. Christopher Plummer's been in so many great films. I think of him as doing Wellington in Waterloo, for example, you know. Just a really great cast. Amazing.
Yeah, and look, I haven't seen a lot of things that Kim Cattrall's been on, but I know that she is a very big deal, and this is early in her career, and I think she gives a really good performance.
Very fair.
Let's talk about the visuals, Rob. When we did our episode on Star Trek 2 a month ago, you were very down on the visuals, and I wasn't that much better. Thoughts here?
I think they're fine. They're solid. They're workmanlike. You know, they won't blow your socks off, though. I'm starting to think that's a bit of a Trek thing, though, to put the money, or what money there is, into focusing on the scripts, maybe, and not trying to reinvent cinema like Star Wars would do. You know, that's a very George Lucas sort of thing. For 1991, I'll say a lot of these shots wouldn't have looked out of place in Return of the Jedi from 1983.
Yeah.
Probably not because they couldn't do better, but because Trek, again, just never seems to have been in that arms race to have, like, the most cutting-edge effects. It seems to be more about the ideas in Trek than the effects. Yeah,
there is a certain amount of practicality to that. I mean, it was made for $30 million, it made $97 million. So Trek, when it worked, could return a profit, but it wasn't Star Wars either. I think that because of what a phenomenon Trek is, we sort of perhaps overrate just how popular it is. It's still doing well, but not Star Wars well. It's not the Terminator. It's not Alien.
No, and when you talk about those box office, I mean, you've got to halve that 90 million because the cinemas keep half. So, you know, if it was made for 30 and it's taken 45, it's into profit before it goes to home video.
Yeah.
That's quite good. Yeah.
No. It's making a profit and doing quite well. Not as well as Star Trek 4, but it's also, not a blockbuster in some ways as well. So we need to be aware of that. Look, Industrial Light and Magic are back for this one, which I think does make a significant difference because they know how to get the most out of models. They know how to film them. They know how to make them work. I don't think anything looks bad here. I do think that the final space battle actually looks really good. I love the way the torpedo comes through the saucer of the Enterprise, and I like how it all looks. I think it's quite schmick. They did set a bit of a trend, though, Rob, with what's now actually known in the industry as the Praxis effect, which is that ring that expands when Praxis blows up. That's been seen in a lot of movies now, and indeed in the Lucas bastardized version of Return of the Jedi, the Death Star blows up with a new Praxis effect.
Yeah, it sure does. I'm also thinking in the prequels when Jango Fett is blowing up those asteroids.
Yes.
With the delayed sound effect, like they blow up and start expanding with what I would call a Praxis effect before you hear the sound.
Yes.
You know, that bit? Yeah. I think that could be called a praxis effect too.
Yeah, so look, I think the effects are definitely better than Star Trek 2 was. I'm not blown away by them in the way that I would be by a brand new Star Wars film, but I think it looks good. The other thing that I think looks just absolutely spectacular is that they did take the second filming unit to Alaska. And I know you said, Rob, that filming a Siberia-like gulag in the tundra is, again, very obvious, and it is, but I think it's worth it for those just spectacular chopper shots of the glaciers in Alaska, which just add a certain sense of spectacle to the movie, although they are all stand-ins. They didn't actually take Shatner and DeForest Kelley to Alaska.
Right. Yeah, no, it does look really cool when they're running up to the edge of the glacier. Yeah, it looks really great.
Although I do sort of wonder how they got down, but yeah.
Yeah, well, indeed.
Rob, I said last time Star Trek 2 was one of my top 3 scores for a Star Trek movie. Star Trek 6 is also one of them. And again, a fairly new composer did this. Cliff Idleman was only 26 at the time. Originally, Nicholas Meyer just wanted to use Holst the Planets as the soundtrack. And then he realised how hard it would be to mix and how expensive it would be to get the rights for it. So he just said to this young composer, do me the planets, but Star Trek-y.
Yeah.
And I think he does a really, really good job.
Yeah, he's not going for like big heroic fanfare so much as there's this Cold War sort of paranoia sort of vibe, like very low brass, very tense strings. You know, it's like a thriller. You know, it's not so much space adventure, it's more thriller, political conspiracy, you know, that sort of vibe. And that suits the film perfectly. So a big tick there for the score. Good on you, Cliff. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Rob, we'll sort of move towards the back end of this podcast. I think it's worth just talking again about the conspiracy and how that all pays off, because it is a big deal that you have a senior admiral in Star Trek being one of the conspirators, you have the Marine, Colonel West, being a conspirator, and you also have Spock's protege, Valeris, being a conspirator. That really does show that even in the perfect world of Star Trek, people can be conflicted. People who were as concerned about the policy of peace with the Klingons and the wall coming down in space as Kirk was, but rather than accepting it and moving on, saying, no, we're going to push back against this. And there's certainly echoes of the Russian coup against Gorbachev in both this and Colonel Chang's. And the fact that Chang and the Starfleet guys are working together is incredibly ironic. They can both work together to preserve the lack of peace is really good. It does, though, have a small sense of, well, everybody we've met who's not a regular is a bad guy. How did that all strike for you?
I sit here thinking, were we really meant to be shocked when one of the traitors turns out to be Valeris? You know, Kim Cattrall's character. I mean, come on. The film basically tips its hand when you hear Kirk's captain's log at the trial, and you think, well, who was standing there when he recorded it? You know, it was her. So it's one of those twists where the movie might think it's being clever, but surely most people can connect the dots in that moment. Like, how would they have this recording? It could only be her. But that said, I guess the vibe is less that it's, who done it, and more about what that betrayal means for Spock. Because, yeah, she is his protege. She's his literal hand-picked successor to continue on the ship. So the real punch maybe is the personal fallout for him, maybe, rather than just surprise, it's her. And I think that scene where he forces the mind meld on her, it's a surprisingly dark moment for Spock, because let's not beat around the bush. It's a violation, but it's being played out as a necessity, and it makes the dynamic between them very uncomfortable and very complicated, I think, maybe more than most Star Trek would normally do.
Yeah, that scene's definitely come in for quite a bit of criticism since. The novel does attempt to retcon it a bit by having Valeris shocked by the shame that Spock feels, and then accepting she's in the wrong and gives him the information, which is obviously slightly different than him dragging it out of her against her own volition. I hear what you say about Valeris. I do give the movie points, though, for the fact that in the end, 1 + 1 does equal 2. It doesn't cheat. There's no sort of, well, audience, you didn't know this piece of information, but if you did, you could put it all together. Everything there is, as you say, on screen. And in fact, if you look closely, when the hidden bird of prey fires on Gorkon's ship, Kronos 1, you can actually see Valeris turn to a panel and put the false entry into the log. So
right.
it is all there on screen. It doesn't cheat. Is it perhaps too obvious? Yeah, maybe, but I prefer the clues being there so the audience has a genuine chance of getting there themselves than what a lot of modern movies do, which is cheat and say, oh, well, you didn't know this thing, which is fine for me.
Yeah, fair enough.
That brings us to the ending, Rob. I think that it is a really wonderful thing that Star Trek, which was a series that had significant cultural impact, although it was never really loved on TV, certainly on its original run. It struggled to get its third season. It was cancelled after that third season. It took a long time to get the movies up. After the first one, it looked as though it would never get another one. Then, Ricardo Montalban comes along and Nicholas Meyer comes along and okay, they saved the franchise. But then it was a bit shaky and Star Trek V didn't make really a lot of money. And they get here and they go, right, this is it. This is the last movie, the last outing for this full original crew. And to think that Star Trek gets the chance that very few franchises get to say goodbye to that original cast is really special. And I just absolutely get chills still at that whole set of final scenes. Although Kirk's speech is cheesy, I think it's a really lovely denouement to the movie. Then the moment when they're told it's time to go back to space dock to be decommissioned, Kirk's line, second star to the right and onwards till morning, and then the swelling of the music, the Enterprise flies off, and the original crew gets to sign off at the end. It's very cheesy, it's a bit fig jammy in some ways, but I don't care, because I think on the 25th anniversary, after 3 seasons and 6 movies, they've earned that right, and I'm glad they get to say goodbye in a way that, for example, Doctor Who has never really had the chance to do. I mean, Survival gets a quick ad-libbed little sort of tacked-on speech at the end. But, we never get anything like that. It's really special for me.
Well, it's hard in Doctor Who because so many people have already disappeared over the years.
Of course, yes.
That you can't say goodbye to everybody easily unless you have some sort of reunion episode or something. The ending is surprisingly understated, to my mind. But I think that's what makes it work so well. You feel the era is closing. There's a real twinge of sadness, but I don't think it's milked. I don't think it's melodramatic. I couldn't see that happening in modern Star Trek or modern genre TV or film of any kind today. TV or film today would just want to overdo it and maybe have several endings and maybe have a fake-out ending for good measure thrown in, but this just lets them sail off with dignity. And the credits that follow, when you talk about them signing off, literally they're signing their signatures across the screen. I've never seen that done before or since in a film, and I think that's really cool. It's perfect for a curtain call. Yeah,
and it's really important, as you say, that it's not this sad, oh my God, we're leaving and we're going to take on the heartstrings. The music is saying thank you.
Yeah.
And I think as an audience we're saying, yeah, I've enjoyed this film. I've enjoyed what you guys have done. You have been a culturally important phenomenon in the US particularly. Thank you for what you've done. Salute, God bless, on your way.
Yeah, well said.
So Rob, let's talk about our least favourite and most favourite things in this movie.
Yeah.
You can go ahead first. What was your least favourite thing in this rewatch?
Can you hear my anticipation for this question? My least favourite thing, Dave, is easy. It's Chang endlessly quoting Shakespeare. It's so overcooked. It borders on parody. Especially during that final battle, he's just saying all these random famous lines. It's just bizarre. You could dead set make a comedy sketch out of this. I think I've been thinking about this, where he just starts quoting any old nonsense, like the Enterprise fires on him. You cut to him, and he's like, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." and then you go back to the Enterprise and they shoot at him again. Cuts back to him. I have a dream. Back to the Enterprise. Maybe there's some dialogue. We cut back to him. I think, therefore I am. And he just says random shit. It just stops feeling like a character at that point and like just a pompous actor doing a one-man Klingon show or a one Klingon show. It's quite unrealistic. And as I said in the Wrath of Khan episode, I hate using quotes to make something sound deep and meaningful, but this makes Wrath of Khan look restrained in comparison. You just wouldn't sit there as captain of a ship spouting line after line of famous quotes rather than just talking like a normal person. It's silly. It's easily the thing I like least in the film. It's a film I mostly like, but this, no.
Rob, we've just discussed a 2-hour movie, and we are going to snap on a small 10-second grab.
Yes!
Look, I don't mind some of it. I like Chang quoting "to be or not to be" at the dinner, and I'm particularly amused because famously when they created the Klingon language, they said there was going to be no verb to be. So what he actually says is to continue or not continue, which amuses me. There are moments on that bridge confrontation where it does work. I like his line, "Admit it, Kirk, this is how you want it. No peace in our time." I think that's really good. And Plummer delivers it really well. But yes, the point where he's spinning around in his chair, "Cry havoc, and let's slip there." You go, my God, what's going on? It's terrible. It just pushes it a little bit too far. Although I do like the contrast there when between the two captains just afterwards, where Sulu comes in with a target that explosion and fire, and Shatner's just fire. I do like that. But yes, we have the same least favourite thing. There you go. Your most favourite thing, Rob?
This might sound odd, and I've probably got a bit to say here, but it's the fact that the film exists. I sat there in this rewatch thinking, this isn't a film I could see being made today, at least in the same way. This, as I said earlier, it's got Kirk being this very unapologetic, very masculine hero, zero irony. It has iffy territory like the mind meld and so on. Plenty of stuff you wouldn't see done today. But again, as I was saying earlier, real life is messy, politics is messy, people's mental states are messy, the way people handle big situations is messy, and as modern film drifts more and more into telling stories about what the world and people in the world should be like in the writer's mind, rather than here's a story, warts and all, I find films being made even 20 years ago, but certainly 30, 40, 50 years ago, portray topics and situations in much more interesting ways. And I think it's partly to do with the fact we didn't have social media and there was no fear for the filmmakers that they'd wake up on Monday morning after the premiere and someone would be writing about how triggered they were by a certain scene and they'd say it to 50 people on Blue Sky and next thing it'd be like a world global news story. There's a more sort of fearless approach to filmmaking in this era because of that. And importantly, that doesn't mean there's not a message, though. You touched on this earlier, so I'm probably reiterating to some degree. To my mind, the film is about letting go of old hatreds. It's saying, the world changes, and sometimes the hardest thing to do is to trust the people you've spent your whole life fighting.
Yeah.
Kirk learns that he can't let his grief and prejudice set the tone for the future. So it's about growth. It's about forgiveness. It's about handing the torch to a new generation without poisoning them with your baggage. That message is amazing. It's really good. It's really important. And I dare anyone out there to say otherwise. But it comes in a film with scenes and characters I'm sure people would tut-tut at today if it was in a modern film and try and just drag it down because of that and not look at the whole of it and what it's saying, because I think what it's saying is just so good. And I'm sorry I went on there, but that's how I feel.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think that if you made this today, there would be people who would be very critical of what Kirk says in the first half of the movie, missing the point that character growth requires him to start somewhere that's not perfect and become better.
Yeah, that's right.
Look, I think that's a wonderful... There are lots of things I could pick for my favourite thing about this movie. Is it just the the hope and the optimism of the idea of exploring the world comes down in space. Is it that awesome space battle at the end? Is it seeing Sulu on the Excelsior? But in the end, Rob, second star to the right and onward till morning.
Yeah, you like that.
I love that line, and then just the build up from there, the music, the farewell. I just think it's a lovely, perfectly pitched farewell to this crew at the end of a really good movie.
Yeah, if you had to imagine what would Captain Kirk do when he's told, come back to be decommissioned, what would he do? He'd fly off and maybe have one last little adventure, maybe.
Yes.
Go for a fang.
Yeah, absolutely. And even Spock has his, if I was human, I think I would say, go to hell.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah, so it is a perfect ending to a movie. Look, Rob, I picked this for a number of practical reasons, but also because it is my favourite Star Trek movie. I did want to talk about it. Nothing in this rewatch has changed that. I still think it is my favourite movie. Have I noticed some of the flaws? Is it a little bit unsubtle in places? Is Chang a bit over the top in places? Does it struggle to really fit in the rest of the Klingon world we know? Absolutely, but I don't care because its heart is absolutely in the right place. The crew is at the top of their game. It looks sumptuous. It sounds fantastic. And it's just a very easy, wonderful watch for me.
Yeah, there's a lot to like about this one. I completely agree. For mine, it's one of the few Trek films that feels like it really has something to say about prejudice, about politics, about change. The main cast are older, but they use that, and I think that's the right time to be using it. Not back in Wrath of Khan, where I was saying, this feels a little shoehorned in and a bit unearned, that Kirk's like, oh, I'm so old, I'm grounded. Here Kirk is grappling with bitterness because he's got something to be bitter about. Spock, yes, gets to play the statesman. McCoy's dragged into the mess. It just feels right this time. It lands better. And that Cold War thriller vibe, I think, is a bit different for a Trek film. And there's that sense of finality at the end without it turning into a funeral. And I think it's also tighter than a lot of Trek. There's no whale hunting detours. There's no god planets. It's just a solid, grown-up story. It's got a bit of grit in there, which is what you need. It's not perfect to my mind. I have criticised some things here tonight, but it's very, very good. It's an 8 out of 10 for me.
Well, that was the second of our Alternate Galaxies episodes on a Star Trek film. We did say we'll do 3, and the third one would be on a TNG film. We decided to put it up to the listeners on Twitter to decide which one to watch.
Yeah.
And in their wisdom, Rob, our listeners have given us a tied vote.
Can you believe that?
I know, between Generations and First Contact. So look, Rob and I have had a bit of a chat off mic. We've talked about what we might have to say, each of us, about those movies, and decided we actually probably have more to say about First Contact. So we are going to do that next time. But in deference to the listeners equally supporting Generations, we will put that in the pocket, and maybe in 6-7 months' time, we'll come back and do just a one-off special on Generations as well.
Yeah, so we will do it, just not straight away.
No, so we'll be back in a month or so with an Alternate Galaxies on Star Trek. I still call them by their number, Star Trek 8 First Contact. But until then, I've been Dave.
And I've been Rob.
Second star to the right, Rob, and onwards till morning.
Live long and prosper, Dave.
Peace and long life.
Very good. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
To pieces, the Klingons can't hold on. No cash for phasers, no credit for war, so they knock on the Federation's door. Captain Kirk says, peace, you've got to be kidding. They murdered my son, I'll never be forgiven. But orders are orders, so off they go, breaking bread with Klingons. The tension's set to blow. Torpedoes on the side, everybody smiling while they're plotting homicide. Conspiracies and Klingons, a Vulcan telling lies. Welcome to the future where nobody plays nice. Gorkon gets blasted, who pulled the and McCoy wind up on ice. Space Siberian prison isn't very nice. A frozen gulag with nowhere much to run, but Kirk makes survival almost look like fun. Meanwhile, Spock's on the bridge, cool as can be, running logic circles round the whole conspiracy. It's diplomacy in space with torpedoes on the side. Everybody smiling while they're plotting homicide. Conspiracies and Klingons, a Vulcan telling lies. Welcome to the future where nobody plays nice. Valeris betrays them all, and Spock's not amused. Mind melt, torture, secrets all diffused. Chang's cloaked ship rains fire from the stars until one smart torpedo says, "Hey, there you are." So they save the president, the galaxy's aligned. Kirk leaves the past and his vengeance behind. The Enterprise sails toward one final dawn. Second star to the right, and straight on till morn. It's diplomacy in space with torpedoes on the side. Everybody smiling while they're plotting homicide. Goodbye, Captain Kirk, we'll miss your grumpy face till the next movie drags you back to outer space.